All right, we're in Proverbs. It's lesson 31, but it is chapter 28. As we pick up here, Solomon is still speaking. He is talking to us with being very about some very important things. Verse 1 of chapter 28 says this: "The wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are bold as lions." Now, that's just Solomon saying this way. You know, whenever you're a wicked person, you are constantly looking over your shoulder because of maybe the lawman coming after you. And the lawman may not even know you're the person who did what you did, but you're afraid that somebody knows. And so wicked people who do bad things are constantly looking over their shoulder, worried about someone coming to catch up with them. Where if you're a righteous person, you don't have to look over your shoulder. You don't have to worry about anything. You can live with a boldness like a lion, walking anywhere you want to walk. A wicked person has to be careful where they walk because of their wicked ways and the things they've done. They have to be careful where they're seen, what they do, who they're with. Not so with a righteous person. A righteous person must make sure that they don't walk into a trap, but a righteous person doesn't have to worry about the authorities coming down upon them because they have done something wrong. So what a wonderful way Solomon has of saying that to us. Verse 2 says this: "By the transgression of a land, many are its princes. But by a man of understanding and knowledge, so it endures." The key word here is the word transgress. Transgress means to cross over somebody's property or somebody's land that does not belong to you. And of course, we know how this is. In many other countries, it still operates this way. Some king of some other land will see a weaker king and transgress his land and take over the land. And lo and behold, over and over and over through a person's life, they never know who the next power is that's going to come take over their land, take over their government, and become their new king. And so for those pieces of property, of lands, countries, where they are being transgressed by people who are greedy and want that land, sure enough, they have different kings, different rulers, different princesses. You think about this. Think about the Ukraine at this point in time. We know that the president of the Russian Empire, or whatever you want to call it, Russian government, wants the Ukraine. And so he is transgressing, sending his soldiers to transgress that land. Well, so what Solomon is also saying here, that in turn, when a good prince reigns over the property, a good prince who reigns with wisdom, a good prince who reigns with strength, a good prince who, when the land is invaded, will fight those people back, those are the kingdoms that will endure. And as I'm reminded of this, we think about maybe the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom in the Bible of Israel. The northern kingdom had 10 tribes. Southern kingdom were 2 tribes, Benjamin and Judah. The northern kingdom had 20 kings. The southern kingdom had 20 kings. However, the southern kingdom lasted 120-something years longer than the northern kingdom. And every time they turned around, Jeroboam II was overrun by a king, and then there's a king came along by the name of Omri, and he served for, let's say, a month or 90 days, and then Zimri overthrew him, and then lo and behold, Omri turned around and overthrew him after Zimri ended up being chased by some of the people. The king of that northern kingdom, he was a king for just a few days, and so he set the house afire and he burned himself in the house. And then Omri came back in. It's just all this turmoil going off through these wicked kings, because all of the northern kings were wicked kings. And yet in the south, we had wonderful kings, had godly kings who would serve 55 years or 50 years or 48 years or 43 years, an adulthood, of lifetime of an adult. for those southern kings. And so they were good kings. And they made sure that they defended their people and did not allow other kings to come in and to transgress their lands. And so Solomon is right there also when he says, if a king allows his land to be overrun, many different kings, many different authorities rule over that land. Verse 3 says, a poor man who opposes the lowly is like a driving rain which leaves no food. Well, that just doesn't make sense, does it? Can you gather any sense out of that? Well, when you're doing studying and you come up against a verse like this that just doesn't make sense, you got to go do some studying. So I went back and did some studying, and lo and behold, a better translation of this from the original should read, a strong man who is destitute and hungry opposes the lowly. A strong man who is destitute and hungry opposes the lowly. In fact, the strong man will bring harm to those who are less fortunate than he is when he opposes them, just as a strong rain, when it comes in with all its wind and everything, will break the fruit off of the vines and break the fruit off of the trees so that they are not able to mature, they're not able to grow, and they are destroyed. A strong man who is hungry and who is destitute will oppress and hurt the lowly, just like a strong rain that comes will hurt the fruit that are on its vines and its branches. Going on to verse 4 says this, those who forsake the law praise the wicked, but those who keep the law strive with them. There is a great disparity that exists between the wicked and the righteous. They are worlds apart. They are miles apart. Law breakers, the wicked who break the laws, are those who are constantly at odds with righteous people. Righteous people are constantly at odds with wicked people. Now, we're living in a day that is unprecedented in many ways, as far as I'm concerned. Our country is fearful of wicked people. Now, we're not saying that any wicked people have done anything in our neighborhood or done anything in our community, but we are downright fearful that it's going to happen. In fact, here in Texas, we're so downright fearful that something's going to happen that the day after the attack that happened in San Bernardino, California, a little while back, the day after it happened, across the United States, the report came to us that our government had to approve or disapprove the licensing of over 180,000 people to become a handgun carrier. That number was staggering to me, especially when they came back and said that was 2 people every second. 2 people the day after the attack happened in California. 2 people every second across the United States. That tells me that even in Podunk, Arkansas, or I won't pick on it that much, okay? Or nowhere, Nebraska, or awfully cold North Dakota. It doesn't matter where you are and how secluded you are, or where you are out on a farm. In fact, if you're out on a farm, you probably already got handguns or whatever. People are fearful, and we are fearful. We are fearful for our lives. And I'm going to tell you what's interesting. I'm not so sure we are fearful for our lives as much as we are fearful for our families' lives. I don't worry about dying, but I worry about my family dying. I don't worry about me protecting myself, but I worry about protecting my family, my wife, and my daughter. And I think all of those of us who are righteous, we worry about those same things. And sometimes in some religions, we get to worrying about whether we should pick up arms and defend ourselves. And yet, if you want to go back to the Old Testament, just start in the book of Genesis and see how God's people defended themselves against the wicked. Don't ever forget. We like to think about Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons has father. You know that song we sang as a kid? We thought he's just a nice old gentle old man. Don't forget that when Lot was kidnapped and taken up towards Damascus, up through Dan and then to Damascus, which was in Syria, the Lord came and told Abraham what was going on. And Abraham gathered 300 of his fighting men that were part of his family, part of his employees, and they marched up and they defeated the 5 most powerful kings in the world at that point in time, destroying them and their armies, and brought Lot back home. Abraham was a man of war when it was time to be a man of war. Well, we have people that are worried about gun statistics. I would challenge you with gun statistics to go to the state of Texas concealed handgun website, and they keep on that website, since we've been doing the concealed handgun license thing, a list of all the convictions statewide and stats that have to do with handguns. Now they run 2 years behind, and here's the reason why. They have a big old long list of probably 75 to 100 different categories by which people are convicted of criminal crimes in the state of Texas. In 2013, there were over 67,000 convictions in 2013. Convictions went before the judge, received a conviction. Not talking about going before the judge and getting off and going home. No, going before the judge and being convicted of a crime. Over 67,000 convictions. In 2012, it was 58,000 convictions or something like that. But let's go back to 2013. Of those 67,000 people who were convicted of a crime and punished, either being sent to prison or whatever, for that criminal act, that crime, 158 people held concealed handgun permits in the state of Texas. We're only talking the state of Texas. But when you go down the list, they've got each one of those crimes listed, and they've got how many people were convicted, and then how many people those people were convicted had a concealed handgun license. And only on 3 of those categories was there a handgun used in the crime. You follow me? Aggressive with a lethal weapon, a handgun, okay? It says that. So when I looked at this, I looked at that, I thought, well, wait a minute. There are 158 people who were convicted of a crime who had a concealed handgun license, but only 3 concealed handgun licenses were convicted of doing something with a gun. And one of those crimes, of those 3 that was listed there, had 2 people on it, and one had 1 and one had none. So one thing with a gun had no handgun guys. One had 2 and one had 1. The one that had 2 were crimes of carrying a handgun onto an airport property and going to security with a handgun. 2013. In 2013, if you went there and you had the handgun at the security, they prosecuted you for that. So 2 people who carried handgun licenses went to the counter to go through security on an airplane, and they had their gun on them, and there was no remedy for it. Interesting thing, this year, our legislature has now made a remedy for that. That if you show up with the gun, starting in January, if you show up with the gun, according to this site, this 2016 January, you show up with the gun, the remedy is you have the option to turn away and go back and dispose of it somehow, get rid of it, and then come back through the line. That's the new remedy. But back then in 2013, that remedy did not exist, according to this document, which comes from the state of Texas. Only one CHL handgun holder was a crime involved where a handgun was involved. It did not. The state was it was for aggression with a handgun. It was aggression. So I don't know what that means, but all I'll know is it's telling me out of 67,000 convictions in 2014, 60,000 plus. I don't know the odd numbers. It was more than 67,000. Not 68, but 67,000 plus. Only one concealed handgun license owner did something. You go back to 2012, there were only 2. So that tells me something about people who go get concealed handgun licenses out of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that have them. It tells me that it is counterintuitive to what we would think would be a normal thing. You would think if more people had guns, more crimes would happen. You would think even if people who had guns legally, more crimes would happen. Because that's what we're being told. The more guns you have, the more crimes are going to happen. Because those guns are evil. The reality is, the stats tell us something different. The statistics tell us that the more people that have guns, the less crime is there. Now, also, you go, that just caused me to go look someplace else. I started looking at metropolitan cities who allowed guns to be carried with licenses and that did not allow guns to be carried for licenses over the past 10 years. You know, they've done statistics on that. In the cities that do not allow just everyday folks to be licensed and carry a handgun, the crime and the aggression with guns has gone up 52% over the last 10 years. The areas where, in metropolitan areas and towns where they are allowed to carry guns, the crime has gone down 41%. Well, 52 and 41 is a long ways away. Now, listen, you can do anything with statistics and with percentages. I understand that. But the thing that we have to understand is we have to protect ourselves and we have to protect our families. If we do it in a law-abiding way, we strive to do it in a law-abiding way, as Solomon says here. Listen, if we do it that way, we're going to be in God's graces. But if we forsake the law and we do something in a different way, wickedness takes over. I know I wanted to get that in, so I took up your time. But I challenge you to go to the websites, on our state websites, just put in concealed hand. What you're hearing on TV, what you're hearing about worried about guns and all that kind of stuff, you know, they make a good argument. But the reality is, it's just opposite. Yes, sir.
In the United States, every day, over 100 people die as a result of automobile accidents. When was the last time you heard your president call a beer summit over the elimination of automobile
Absolutely.
accidents?
Absolutely. I'm going to repeat that because I want it on the tape. He says, Mr. Gormley says this: every day, over 100 people die in automobile accidents. That involves alcohol, right? Whatever.
Not necessarily all of them.
Okay, not necessarily. But when, huh?
As a result of being an automobile accident.
Been automobile accident. That's right. And so when is our illustrious president and media going to call a summit over automobile accidents and the elimination of automobiles? Yes, that seems right. Yeah. After all, those are causing greenhouse gases and everything else, and so they're evil also. Do y'all want to go back to horse and buggies? Yes, sir. You worry about, yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true. Because we're all, a house is going to have, there's a good chance that. Yes, sir, back there. Okay. That's right. What he's saying is in Mexico, it's even against the law to have ammunition. So that's real oppression. However, the deaths in Mexico by handguns and ammunition by the criminals is sky high. It's really bad. All right, let's go on. All right, that's enough of that. Let's talk about evil. We're going to talk about some more evil. Verse 5. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all things. Now listen, the Lord is the perfection of justice. I mean, justice from the Lord is perfect. And because evil people do not have a relationship with the Lord, they do not understand and they do not appreciate justice. Those who have a relationship with the Lord not only have an understanding and an appreciation for justice, but their wisdom also allows them to understand all of the qualities of the Lord's creation. We understand it because the Lord is in charge. Let's look at verse 6. Verse 6 says this: better is the poor who walks in integrity than he who is crooked, though he be rich. Understand this: neither poverty nor the wealth makes any difference in the eyes of the Lord. The Lord does not care whether you are poor, and He does not care whether you are wealthy or not. What the Lord cares about is what integrity you have. And He also hates the crookedness that you might have. Well, the world says it is better to be rich, but the Lord says it's better to have integrity. The world says you are cursed because you are poor, but the Lord says it is better to be poor than to be crooked. That's a restatement of what that proverb says. Look at this, verse 7. He who keeps the law is a discerning son. But he who is a companion of gluttons humiliates his father. Okay, both sides of this proverb speak of honor and humiliation that a son can bring to a father. Kids can humiliate you faster than anything else in this world. But kids can also bring honor to you quicker than anything else in this world. Law-abiding sons bring honor. Gluttons and their friends bring dishonor. Gluttons, excess. Those who do things to excess bring dishonor. Verse 8. He who increases his wealth by interest and usury. Usury is the word we got to look at there. Do you know what usury is? Outrageous interest rates. Gathers it for him who is gracious to the poor. Ill-gotten gain or ill-gotten wealth by charging the poor some exorbitant interest rate will not last long. The Lord will gather in due time, and He will distribute it back to those who are gracious. I wish you could see this proverb in action from my side of the ministry. Some of you can because you're involved in my side of the ministry, and so you see it and it's unspoken. But truly, it is a true thing. We cannot do the Robin Hood thing in America, where we steal from the rich and give to the poor. Do you know what happens when we do that? We steal from the rich and we give to the poor. So we steal from the rich and we give to the poor. And oh, by the way, while we're giving to the poor, we're also going to give them a free cell phone. So now they don't have to pay for their cell phone because they're using the one the government's giving them. So they're going to take that expendable cash and they're going to continue to do it, use it on things that just going to put the money back into the hands of the rich. It's an unbelievable cycle. And so the poorer people don't have money, and so, but yet they waste money because, listen, I have met in my lifetime many folks who are absolutely poor in the sight of many of them, but they are wealthy in reality. My very first church, 1974, Temple Baptist Church in Longview, Texas. We were having a choir group come to the church, and we were putting that choir group up into homes. And in these homes, they would take care of them and feed them. Well, the preacher had already told me about this one lady's home. He said, listen, when she brings biscuits and gravy or anything like that, and she sets it out on the table for the Wednesday night potluck meals, don't eat any of that because we're not really sure she's not got a real clean house. Well, I didn't think about that, and sure enough, it came up. I had 2 girls. I needed to put them someplace, so I put them in her home. Well, the pastor about had a fit. He said, you need to go that home, and you need to change your mind. So I went to the home. Sure enough, the home is wallpapered with newspapers that she's used Elmer's glue, or I think it was actually flour paste that she had made. And she had plastic over the windows to keep it from blowing in. And she literally had the tops off the cans we opened of pork and beans and stuff were nailed to the floor over holes and in the walls. And of course, in her house, it was full siding on the inside, the lap board before they did the plaster and that type of stuff to keep the animals out. And it was a filthy house. So I came back and I had to find a way to take those 2 girls out of her house. I understood what the pastor was saying, not meaning that it was right or wrong for me to do it. And finally, I just called her and said, I said, listen, they've had a dropout of 2 girls, and so we're not going to need your house. Fortunately, I had another house, and I was able to put them in, and no one knew any of the difference. Some of that stuff happens around. Well, when her husband died, about 3 months before I landed at that church in January, he died in 73. I landed there January the 20th of 1974. It's my very first church, my first job, and all that. About 3 months before, he had died, and she came to the pastor, and she said, Pastor, you know, my husband never came to church, and he never would allow me to tithe. He said, but I went to business school, and I know about taking care of business. And he always wasted our money, but I'm going to tell you that I'm going to save money, and I'm going to do it like a business person should do it. And when I die, I'm leaving everything I have to the church. Or Merle Brooks, the pastor, he basically laughed in her face because they didn't have anything. And so her Social Security was $531 a month. And so time went on, and I heard that story over and over again. And finally, time went on, and I left the church and went down to Laird Hill Baptist Church in Kilgore. And then from there, I went to First Baptist Pleasant Grove outside of Dallas, out on Loop 12. From there, came to Baytown. So we're now down 10 years down the road, and at evangelism conference, I see Merle Brooks at evangelism conference at the Tarrant County Convention Center up in the Fort Worth area, and he's coming around the loop. All those convention centers have these outer loops that go around them, to go around, and he sees me, and he is so ecstatic when he sees me. He comes up to me, and he says, little Miss So-and-so, she died. I said, really, did she die? She said, yes, she died, and she left everything to the church. And I said, oh, really? Really, did she? I said, I bet that wasn't very much. He said, no, it was $1.25 million. And she had nothing to begin with. The husband died. She lived on half the money. She tithed on all of it, and she put the other up and saved it, invested it. And if you don't remember, That was in the 70s. And so she went through all of that 17% and 20% interest rates and all of that, where the money just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And she just kept putting it back and doing good investments. And she took care of it. She never fixed her house. She never painted her house. She never painted the wallpaper. She drove the 3-wheel bicycle all the time. She never drove the car. She had a little umbrella that went over her bicycle when it was raining that she'd ride to church on. She never missed church. She was also the prayer warrior. He had told me, if you ever want something to happen, or if you don't want something to happen, don't ask her to pray for it, because if she prays for it, it is going to happen. So that church, Merle Brooks was able to take that church, which was dying on the vine, and move out on the loop, the new loop outside of Longview, and build a church debt-free on what she left. Oh, my soul. The Lord really turns around and gives back to the gracious, just like Solomon says. If the Lord says it, if it's in God's word, you better believe it. Verse 9, he who turns away his ear from listening to the law, even his prayer is an abomination. Just understand this. The wicked may pray all they want to pray. All they want to pray. As much as they want to pray. They can pray. But their prayers are a stench in the... That's what the word abomination means. It's a stench in the nostrils of the Lord until they enter into a relationship with Him. Then His prayers are like sweet, sweet, sweet incense. Verse 10 says, he who leads the upright astray is in an evil way, will himself fall into his own pit, but the blameless will inherit good. Ungodliness leads to misery. No matter how happy you are when you do the act, ungodliness will lead to misery. Godliness leads to goodness. Being good leads to good. Trying to lead a godly person in a wrong direction to stray away from that which is good is, and the result is an ungodly act that is will cause that person who is leading a person astray to be trapped by his own godly act. Ungodly trappers trap themselves. In other words, that's what Solomon is saying here. Verse number 11. The rich man is wise in his own eyes, but the poor who has understanding sees through him, through the wise. Wealth does not buy or provide automatic wisdom. It doesn't. One great example of that, I have never in my life bought a lottery ticket. But I know people who have bought lottery tickets. When we were building Danbury, the guy who brought the crane out that was putting the big trusses, the big 6 trusses, in the day, he brought them out one day, and we brought the crane out, and we did 3 one day. And the next day, we did 3. In between those 2 days, he learned that he had just won $29 million in the Texas lottery. He is going to quit his crane job. He only came out there to be with us because he liked us and he knew I fed him and he liked our enjoyment time and he wanted to finish that project. He was typical. And he had this laundry list of everybody he was going to buy something for, etc., etc. Well, that was in the first part of building Danbury. Towards the end, we need a crane again to lift those spaghetti trusses, as I call them. They're made out of 2x4s, and they're kind of like this, where the other ones were just nice and sturdy, across the dorm. And he shows up. He's driving the crane. And I said, I thought you were going to quit. I did. I said, so you just working because you want to? He said, no, I need to. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, they allow you to take that money a little at a time, or they allow you to take one big buyout. So I took the big buyout. I wanted the money. But I don't get all that. I just got little of it. And he said, then, By the time I bought everybody a house and everybody a car and everybody asked me for money, I had money I loaned him. I turned around. He said, and after I paid the taxes on it, I ran out of money in 9 months. And now he's got to work. And I said, so what are you doing? He says, I'm playing the lottery every day. But he was miserable. He was just miserable. Just because he had money didn't mean that he was wise. You got it? He didn't know how to handle it. And then I turn around and I've got some of you, and not only you, but other people in the church who they've got $400,000 or $500,000 that it took them their entire working lifetime to save, and they're living okay on it. And when they die, they'll still have most of it because they're wise in how they budget and handle their money. And they know how to say no to people on things they shouldn't do. They're wise. They're wise. Even the poor can see what the wise do that is wrong.